The Empress's hand trembled as she signed the rejection document. The seventh suitor dismissed the cycle, and with him her council's last shred of patience. High Counselor Varath slammed his palm against the obsidian table, the sound echoing through the throne chamber like a gunshot. You condemn us all with your stubbornness, Kaelith. Empress Kaelith, Vel Sorathan, did not flinch. She had stopped flinching at council meetings 3 years ago. Around the same time, she stopped believing any of them saw her as anything more than a breeding vessel for political consolidation. Her silver-white skin caught the bioluminescent light of the chamber, and her 4 pupils, 2 in each eye, contracted with carefully concealed fury. Lord Varath, she said, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance of Sorathi nobility. The Prince of Kelvor spent our entire courtship dinner explaining how he would manage my emotional deficiencies once bonded. I will not chain myself to a male who views me as broken machinery. You are broken. The words came from Counselor Maeth, an elderly female, whose clan had opposed Kaelith's bloodline for 6 generations. Unbonded at your age. Barren of heirs. Your own sister's children will inherit what should pass through you. Kaelith's fingers curled against her throne's armrest. The accusation wasn't wrong. By Sorathi standards, she was defective. Most of her species formed permanent pair bonds in early adulthood, a neurological process as involuntary as breathing. But Kaelith's bond centers had never activated. She had felt attraction, yes. Admiration, even something adjacent to love. But never the consuming permanent fusion that defined Sorathi partnership. The healers called it a malformation. The priests called it a curse. Her mother, before dying, had simply called it lonely. The Terran delegation arrives within the hour, High Counselor Varath continued, clearly deciding to abandon the marriage argument for more immediate concerns. Ambassador Chen brings their proposal for the neutral zone mining rights. I trust you can manage basic diplomacy without rejecting them for insufficient emotional availability? Kaelith said nothing. The Terrans were new to the galactic stage, a species that had achieved faster-than-light travel barely 2 centuries ago. Most elder races viewed them as children playing with dangerous technology. Useful for manual labor and frontier settlement perhaps, but certainly not worthy of serious political consideration. She had never met one in person. The delegation arrived precisely on schedule, which itself was notable. Most species treated Sorathi timekeeping as a suggestion. The Terrans apparently did not. Ambassador Chen was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She introduced her team with crisp efficiency: scientific attaché, legal counsel, cultural liaison, and Marcus Cole, technical specialist. Kaelith's gaze snagged on him without permission. He was tall for a Terran, though still shorter than most Sorathi males. Brown skin, dark hair cropped close to his skull, and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile sometime in the distant past. But it was his eyes that caught her, brown so dark they appeared black, and filled with a weariness that resonated somewhere deep in her chest. He noticed her looking. Most beings flinched from imperial attention. Marcus Cole simply met her gaze, held it for a respectful moment, and then returned his attention to the ambassador. No fear. No ambition. No calculation. Just acknowledgement. The negotiations proceeded as expected. The Terrans wanted access to mineral deposits in the neutral zone. The Sorathi wanted technological exchanges and defensive commitments. Ambassador Chen was skilled, but Counselor Varath was better. He maneuvered her into concession after concession while maintaining the fiction of collaborative discussion. Kaelith watched Marcus Cole instead of the proceedings. He stood slightly apart from his delegation, a tablet in his hands, occasionally making notes. But she noticed that his attention kept drifting, not to her, but to the architectural details of the chamber, the bioluminescent patterns in the walls, the way the light refracted through the crystal ceiling. He studied her world with quiet fascination rather than the dismissive superiority most elder races displayed. During a recess, she found herself walking toward him before conscious decision could intervene. You find our architecture interesting, technical specialist Cole? He turned, and up close she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his temples. Older than she'd initially assessed. Your Majesty. He inclined his head, not a bow, but a gesture of respect. I apologize if I was distracted. Your crystalline resonance systems are remarkable. We've theorized about harmonic architecture for decades, but seeing it implemented. He gestured at the walls. It's like watching mathematics sing. Kaelith felt something shift in her chest. An unfamiliar sensation. Most visitors comment on the aesthetic value. You see the engineering. I see both. A ghost of something crossed his face. Not quite a smile, but its memory. Beauty and function aren't mutually exclusive. The best engineering is beautiful because it works. A philosophical position. A practical one. I spent 20 years building things that had to work in hostile environments. You learn to appreciate elegant solutions. And now you are a technical specialist for diplomatic missions? The ghost smile vanished entirely. Now I'm whatever Ambassador Chen needs me to be. There was a story there. Loss carved into the lines of his face. Grief worn smooth by time but never quite erased. Kaelith recognized it because she saw something similar in her own reflection. The negotiations will conclude tomorrow, she heard herself say. If you wish to study our resonance systems more closely, I could arrange access to the engineering archives. Marcus Cole's dark eyes searched her face, looking for hidden motives. Finding none, because there were none, she realized. Just an inexplicable desire to speak with him again. He nodded slowly. I would appreciate that, Your Majesty. Kaelith. The word escaped before she could stop it. Sorathi rulers did not offer their personal names to foreign technicians. When we are not in formal session, you may call me Kaelith. Something flickered in his expression. Not attraction exactly. Something more like recognition. Then I'm Marcus, he said. When we're not in formal session. From across the chamber she felt Counselor Varath's gaze boring into her back. She would pay for this irregularity later. In pointed questions and thinly veiled accusations. At that moment she found she did not care. The engineering archives occupied the lower levels of the palace, carved directly into the living crystal that formed the foundation of Sorathi civilization. Marcus arrived at the appointed hour, alone, carrying only his tablet, an expression of carefully contained curiosity. Kaelith had dismissed her attendants for the evening, another breach of protocol that would fuel council whispers. She told herself it was for efficiency. The truth was simpler and more dangerous. She wanted to speak with him without witnesses. The resonance systems date back 11,000 years, she began, leading him through corridors that pulsed with soft light. Our ancestors discovered that certain crystalline structures could be grown in patterns that amplified and directed energy. The palace itself is technically one enormous instrument. Marcus ran his fingers along the wall, his touch reverent. And it's still functioning after 11 millennia? The crystals are self-repairing, assuming proper harmonic maintenance. We lost some sections during the succession wars, but the core systems have never failed. Remarkable. He was studying a junction point where 7 crystal veins merge into a central node. On Earth, we're lucky if infrastructure lasts a century. We build, it breaks, we rebuild. An endless cycle. Perhaps that is not entirely negative, Kaelith said. Rebuilding allows for improvement. We Sorathi are so devoted to preserving what exists that we sometimes forget to imagine what could be. He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing past the imperial title to something beneath. That sounds like personal experience talking. She should not answer honestly. She should deflect, maintain imperial distance, remember that he was a foreign national, and she was an empress with a council already questioning her judgment. My entire existence is preservation, she said instead. Preserving the bloodline. Preserving political stability. Preserving traditions I never chose and am not permitted to question. She paused beside a crystal formation that sang softly in frequencies most species couldn't hear. I'm 37 cycles old, and I have never once been asked what I want. Only what I owe. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I had a daughter. The past tense hung in the air between them. She was 17 when the colony ship she was traveling on suffered a cascade failure. 3,000 people, including her mother. They had 6 hours of warning before life support failed completely. He stared at the crystal formations without seeing them. I was 4 light years away, receiving real-time updates I couldn't do anything about. I listened to my daughter die because the laws of physics wouldn't let me save her. Kaelith felt something crack inside her chest. Marcus, that was 8 years ago. I rebuilt myself, piece by piece. Found purpose in work. Told myself that keeping busy was the same as healing. He finally met her eyes. It's not. But it's what I had. She understood then why his eyes held that particular weight. Not just grief, but the specific agony of helplessness, of being unable to protect what you loved most. The Sorathi do not speak of loss, she said quietly. We consider it a weakness to acknowledge pain. I have never told anyone that my mother's death still wakes me some nights, gasping like a child, reaching for a hand that isn't there. That's not weakness. His voice was firm. That's love refusing to die. The words struck her like physical force. She had been told all her life that her inability to bond was a defect, that her persistent emotions were immature, that her loneliness was self-inflicted stubbornness. No one had ever suggested that feeling deeply might be strength rather than failure. Your council doesn't approve of you speaking with me, Marcus said, shifting to safer ground. I noticed the looks yesterday. My council doesn't approve of anything I do that wasn't their idea first. Then why invite me here? The honest answer was, I don't know. The more honest answer was, because you looked at me like I was a person instead of a problem. Because you see engineering where others see decoration, she said, which was true if incomplete. Because you asked about function rather than demanding displays of power. Because she hesitated, then committed. Because speaking with you is the first time in years I have felt like myself rather than my title. Marcus absorbed this in silence. She watched emotions move across his face, surprise, consideration, something that might have been reciprocal recognition. I'm not political, he finally said. I don't know court games or proper protocols. Where I come from, you say what you mean and deal with the consequences. That sounds refreshing. It's gotten me in trouble more than once. He almost smiled. But I don't know how to be any other way. Then don't. Kaelith moved closer, close enough to see the individual threads of gray in his hair, the small scar above his left eyebrow. Be exactly what you are. I have spent my entire life surrounded by people performing roles. I find I am very tired of performances. The moment stretched between them. She could feel something building, not the neurological cascade of Sorathi bonding, but something warmer and more frightening. Choice rather than compulsion. Connection rather than fusion. Your Majesty, Kaelith. Marcus's voice was careful. I leave with the delegation in 3 days. Whatever this is. No one. It can't go anywhere. I know. I'm a widower with a dead daughter and nothing to offer Empress. I know. Then why? Because for the first time in 37 cycles, I feel like I'm not alone. She held his gaze, letting him see the truth of it. Even if it's only for 3 days, even if it leads nowhere, that is more than I had before you walked into my throne room. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached out and took her hand. His skin was warm against her silver-white fingers, rough with calluses from a lifetime of physical work. Okay, he said quietly. 3 days. She did not know what would come of this. She suspected nothing good. Her council would be scandalized, the other noble houses would gossip, and Marcus would leave on his ship and return to his life, and she would remain here, alone, fulfilling duties she had never wanted. But his hand was warm in hers, and for this moment, that was enough. The crisis came on the second day, as crises always did, without warning and without mercy. Kaelith was in the small garden adjoining her private chambers, showing Marcus the bioluminescent flowers that bloomed only in darkness, when her personal guard burst through the entrance with weapons drawn. Your Majesty, the Council has declared emergency session. You must come immediately. The words must come rather than request your presence told her everything she needed to know about how badly the situation had deteriorated. She exchanged a glance with Marcus. He understood immediately, stepping back to a respectful distance. What has happened? The Kelvorian prince, the one you rejected. The guard's face was grim. He has returned with a battle fleet. He claims you insulted his honor and demands either marriage or satisfaction through combat. The blood drained from Kaelith's face. Kelvorian honor debt was absolute, once claimed. It could only be resolved through the demanded terms. And Prince Varath had the military strength to enforce his claim. How many ships? 47 warships. They have established blockade positions around our primary trade routes. 47 ships. The Sorathi defensive fleet numbered 32, many of them aging vessels that hadn't seen combat in generations. The mathematics were brutally simple. Fight and lose. Or submit to a forced marriage with a male who viewed her as property to be managed. Neither option was acceptable. The emergency council session was chaos. Councilors shouted over each other, blame flying in all directions, though most of it landed on Kaelith. She had rejected the prince. She had insulted Kelvorian honor. She had brought this catastrophe upon them all through her selfish refusal to fulfill her duty. There must be a third option, she said, cutting through the noise. Something beyond war or surrender. There is no third option. Councillor Mayeth's voice was shrill with fear. You created this situation with your defiance. You will resolve it by accepting the prince's terms. I will not bond with a male who treats me as defective goods. Then our people will die for your pride. The accusation struck home because it was partially true. Her choices had contributed to this moment. Her refusal to simply accept what was expected, to be the compliant empress her council wanted, had created an enemy where there might have been an ally. But accepting Varath's terms meant accepting a lifetime of being managed. Of having her emotions corrected, her independence stripped, her identity erased in favor of what he deemed appropriate. It meant becoming exactly what everyone already believed she was. Broken, fixed by a proper male's guidance. She would rather die. The thought crystallized with terrible clarity. She would rather die than live as less than herself. I invoke the right of singular combat. The council fell silent. The right of singular combat was ancient law, almost never used, a provision allowing an accused party to face their accuser directly rather than through proxy forces. If she won, the honor debt was satisfied. If she lost, you cannot be serious, Varath said. Prince Varath is a trained warrior. You have never held a blade in combat. The law does not require equal skill, only willingness to face the accusation personally. He will kill you. Perhaps. Kaelith stood, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. But I will die as myself, choosing my fate. That is worth more than a lifetime of managed existence. The council erupted again, but she was no longer listening. Her eyes found Marcus, standing in the observer's gallery where the Terran delegation had been permitted to watch. His face was pale. His hands gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles had gone white. She saw him mouth a single word, "Don't." After the session, he found her in the armory, staring at weapons she didn't know how to use. The combat was scheduled for dawn, less than 12 hours away. "This is suicide," Marcus said without preamble. "You know that." "I know. Then why?" Kaelith lifted a blade, testing its weight. "Too heavy." She set it aside and reached for another. "Because the alternative is worse than death. Because I will not spend my remaining years being corrected by a male who sees my emotions as defects. Because," her voice cracked, just slightly, "because I finally understand what I want, and I would rather die reaching for it than live having surrendered." "What do you want?" She turned to face him. In the dim light of the armory, surrounded by instruments of violence, she had never felt more vulnerable. "I want to choose," she said. "I want to feel what I feel without being told it's wrong. I want to matter to someone not because of my bloodline or my title, but because of who I am." She stepped closer, close enough to see the anguish in his dark eyes. "I want 3 more days with you. I want 30 years. I want to find out what we could have been and if the universe wasn't so determined to keep us apart." Marcus made a sound like something breaking. "Kaelith, I know you're leaving. I know this is impossible. I know I'm being foolish and emotional and everything my council has always accused me of being." Tears she hadn't permitted herself to shed were streaming down her silver-white cheeks. "But I would rather be foolish and feel something real than wise and feel nothing at all." He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a kiss. That would come later, or never. It was simply holding on, 2 broken people clinging to each other in the dark, acknowledging what they'd found, even as it slipped away. "There has to be another way," Marcus said into her hair. "There's always another way. Not this time. I refuse to accept that." He pulled back, gripping her shoulders, his eyes blazing with something she'd never seen before. Not despair, but determination. "I've lost everyone I loved once. I will not stand by and watch it happen again. Not when I can do something." "What can you do?" "You're a technical specialist, not a warrior." "I'm an engineer." A ghost of his almost smile appeared. "And the Kelvorians challenged you to singular combat, not singular sword fighting. The right of singular combat doesn't specify the method, only that the accused must face the accuser directly." Kaelith blinked. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that the laws of physics don't care about honor codes. And I've spent 20 years building things that work in hostile environments." He released her shoulders, already moving toward the armory's tool storage. "I'm going to need access to your crystal resonance systems, some of that harmonic engineering you showed me, and about 10 hours of uninterrupted work time. Marcus, even if you create something, I don't know how to fight." "You won't need to fight." His hands were already sorting through equipment, his mind clearly racing through possibilities. "You'll just need to stand very still and trust me." It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of reckless, emotional, irrational behavior her council had always condemned. Kaelith found herself smiling through her tears. "What do you need?" Dawn arrived cold and clear, the binary suns of the Sorathi system casting long shadows across the ritual combat arena. Prince Varath stood at one end, resplendent in ceremonial armor, his blade gleaming with ancestral significance. His confidence was absolute. He had killed 17 opponents in honor duels, and he expected this morning to yield his 18th. Kaelith stood at the opposite end, wearing no armor and carrying no weapon. Her silver-white skin seemed to glow in the early light, and around her throat hung a delicate crystal pendant that caught the sun's rays and scattered them in rainbow fragments. Marcus had worked through the night. She had watched him, bringing food he forgot to eat and water he forgot to drink, marveling at how his hands moved with such certainty even when his eyes were glazed with exhaustion. He had explained what he was building in fragments, something about resonance frequencies, harmonic feedback loops, crystalline amplification. The pendant will respond to aggressive intent, he'd said as dawn approached. Any hostile action directed at you will trigger a cascading harmonic response. The closer he gets, the stronger the feedback. He literally won't be able to raise a weapon against you. And this is permitted under the combat laws? The laws specify singular combat between accuser and accused. They don't specify that the accused must be defenseless. He'd fastened the pendant around her neck, his fingers brushing her collarbone. Sorathi ancestors built these resonance systems for protection. This is just a very focused application. Now standing in the arena with 1,000 witnesses watching, including her council, the Terran delegation, and Marcus himself in the front row of observers, Kaelith felt the pendant's weight like a promise. You come to face honor debt without weapon or armor? Prince Varath's voice carried across the arena, dripping with contempt. Is this Sorathi cowardice, or merely the confusion of a defective female? Kaelith said nothing. She simply waited. Varath raised his blade and charged. He made it 3 steps before the harmonic feedback hit him. The pendant around Kaelith's neck blazed with sudden light, and a sound like crystalline thunder rolled across the arena. Varath staggered, his blade suddenly too heavy to lift, his limbs refusing to obey commands. He pushed forward another step, and collapsed to his knees, gasping. What's sorcery? Not sorcery, Kaelith said, walking toward him with perfect calm. Engineering. The same crystal technology that has protected my people for 11,000 years, focused through Terran innovation. She stopped a few feet from the kneeling prince. You cannot raise a weapon against me, Varath. You cannot touch me with hostile intent. The laws of physics themselves have chosen sides. This is not honorable combat. You demanded singular combat. You face me directly. You are unable to harm me, while I could end you with a single word to my guards. She crouched, bringing her face level with his. This is victory, Prince Varath. Accept it or die knowing you were defeated by a defective female and her human ally. The arena was utterly silent. Every witness understood what they were seeing. An empress who had found a way to win without fighting, who had turned the enemy's own honor code against him, who had refused to be either victim or warrior, and had instead become something new entirely. Varath's face contorted with rage, then humiliation, then, finally, defeat. I withdraw my honor claim. Louder, so everyone can hear. I withdraw my honor claim. The words were torn from him like teeth. The debt is satisfied. I will depart Sorathi space and trouble you no more. Kaelith rose and turned her back on him, the ultimate gesture of dismissal in Sorathi culture. She walked toward the observer stands, toward Marcus, who was gripping the railing again, but this time with something like wonder on his face. You did it, he said as she approached. You actually did it. We did it. She reached up and touched the pendant. This was your gift. Your genius. I simply had the courage to wear it. The council members were already pushing forward, demanding explanations, questioning the legality of her methods. She would have to face them soon, justify her actions, navigate the political aftermath. But first, she climbed over the barrier into the observer section, ignoring the gasps and protests. She stood before Marcus Cole, technical specialist, widower, engineer, the man who had looked at her and seen a person instead of a title. The delegation leaves tomorrow, she said. I know. I am asking you to stay. His breath caught. Kaelith, I am asking you to stay, she repeated, not as a political arrangement or a diplomatic gesture. I am asking you, Marcus Cole, to stay with me, to build things together, to be whatever we become, even if we don't know what that is yet. She took his hands in hers. I am asking if there is room in your life for an alien empress who doesn't know how to be anything other than what she is. He was silent for so long that she began to fear she had misread everything. That his kindness had been merely kindness, his touch merely comfort, his engineering merely professional service. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not the ghost of a smile, but the real thing, warm and sad and hopeful all at once. Is there room in your bed? She asked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them, honest and vulnerable and terrified. Marcus lifted one of her hands to his lips and pressed a kiss to her silver white knuckles. Only if you want a place in my heart, he said. The council was shouting. The crowds were murmuring. Somewhere, Prince Varath was being escorted away in defeat. None of it mattered. Kaelith, Empress of the Sorathi, 37 cycles old, and finally understanding what it meant to choose, leaned forward, and kissed a human engineer in front of her entire civilization. The scandal would be legendary. The political complications would be endless. Her council would have collective apoplexy, and the noble houses would gossip for generations. She had never been happier. "Stay," she whispered against his lips. "Yes," he whispered back. And in a throne room built of crystal and ancient tradition, humanity once again proved that its greatest strength was not technology or military might, but the stubborn, irrational, utterly magnificent capacity to love. Loved, against all odds,